Hello there, and welcome back to the Chaps Guide, the channel where we explore the topics of men's style, self-development and personal grooming. And today, well, it's a fragrance review, but one which I've really looked forward to bringing to you, because sometimes I sit here and I talk about fragrances I like, because I never talk about any I don't like. I see no purpose in sharing with you fragrances that are no good, but I like some more than others, and this is a classic, and it's Alfred Dunhill's Dunhill for Men. Now, Dunhill, been around a long time. I've spoken about some of its fragrances here on this channel before. They're fragrances which I think offer great value for money, as indeed does this one. And Dunhill, as a fragrance house, and a house of other products as well, has been in existence for quite some time. For most of the last century, it was most closely associated with tobacco products, and it held royal warrants for tobacco products right up until the modern era. I believe some cigarettes are still produced under the Alfred Dunhill license with the name by British American Tobacco. But today we're talking about the fragrance. But you can't break away from the heritage that easy. This is how Dunhill has been considered in the world of advertising in its past.
In an age of compromise, it's reassuring every once in a while to be reminded that traditional craftsmanship can still be found today. Here at the House of Dunhill, the finest traditions of craftsmanship have been maintained for generations.
So there we go, a real blast from the past there. And Alfred Dunhill brought fragrances into its offering in 1934 with this fragrance. He actually asked his sister Mary Dunhill, who was a perfumer in France, if she would consider assisting with the creation of a fragrance, and this is what resulted. And it's become an absolute classic. But what does it smell like? That's the important thing. Let's have a go, shall we? So first of all, let's have a look at that atomizer. Really nice atomizer, and I'm wearing this today. Actually, I put this on after I had a shave this morning, and it has a wonderful fragrance, I have to say. Very much an opening of lemons and citrus, but old classic fragrance as well. And it shares many of its attributes, its accords, with, interestingly, tobacco, that German of all fragrances, made by Morin Wurtz, because Mary Dunhill collaborated with Morin Wurtz when they were creating tobacco in 1959. And I think there is some crossover. It's not entirely dissimilar. Whereas perhaps tobacco is much more flowery, I think Dunhill for Men has that elements of flower, yet it still has something of a brooding masculinity under it as well. You know, there's lemon, there's freshness, but there's definitely cultured heritage fragrance there. Some might say oldie worldy barbershop, but no, I believe it's a little bit more than that. There's a bit more masculinity to it. So what can I'll tell you about some of the attributes to it, shall I? And you'll excuse me for referring to my notes, because I don't want to get these wrong today. The head notes are lemon, lavender, nutmeg and geranium. In the heart, so the middle part of the fragrance, we smell carnation. There are woodsy elements, iris, rose and jasmine. So a lot of floral fragrances here. And finally the base, where the fragrance will dry down to, and the longer lasting element of the fragrance will give us leather, vetiver, oak moss, sandalwood and cedarwood. So you can see there's florality, there's citrus in that opening lemon, and there is lots of those masculine fragrances that we become accustomed to in the base, particularly the leather, the vetiver, the oak moss and the woodsy fragrances, which really, I think, add that masculinity to this Dunhill for Men. So what else can I tell you? Some of its more statistical things perhaps. Well, seasonally, when would you wear this? I think it's got the chops, it's got the strength to be worn in the cooler seasons for sure. It's got sufficient presence, and as you know, we tend to prefer more heavy, more dense fragrances in the winter. This isn't, I wouldn't say deeply dense, but it's certainly something which has the power to be worn in the winter months. Age range? Well, I would say it would definitely veer towards the more mature gentleman. I would say 40 plus. I'm 50 years of age. I love wearing this, and I have done for some time. But that's not to say that if you're 30 and you prefer more traditional fragrances, Dunhill for Men may be the fragrance for you. Time of day when you would wear this? Well, I think it's definitely something you can wear in the daytime. It's office appropriate. It's not going to offend anybody if you're stuck in an elevator or a car with them for a protracted period of time. It's not sufficiently powerful or unpleasant or unusual in nature to have people coughing and gagging. It's relatively quite pleasant. So, you know, is it an occasional fragrance then? Is it something you could wear to a special event or occasion? I would say yes, it is. It has got the presence to be worn for a night out at the opera or a night out down the bar with your chap friends. This has got sufficient power, but not too much to be worn in those situations. Is it masculine? Yes, it is. It was brought into being to be a fragrance for men. It's called for men. Its fragrance has those accords in the wood and the other elements of it, the oak moss and the leather, which make it sufficiently musky to be suitable for a gentleman, although not so much as it's utterly alpha male. You know, it's definitely wearable for a broad range of gentlemen who enjoy classic, elegant fragrances. What's its projection like? I think it's got a good projection. It's not a beast, you know, it's not a monster of a fragrance. It's something which I apply in the morning and, you know, it's going to last 6 or 7 hours. It's an eau de toilette at the end of the day. You know, it's not a super potent juice in here. It's a nice fragrance, but it's not, you know, going to be lasting on your skin for 10 hours. If you put it on in the morning and you're going to the opera in the evening, you may wish to reapply before you go out. Shall we just leave it at that? What third-party comments have I had when wearing this? Well, generally speaking, people don't notice you're wearing it. It's got that catch-all, liked by most people and just acknowledged as a pleasing fragrance. Occasionally though, if you walk in front of somebody down a corridor, they might catch a waft of your cologne and they'll say, wow, that's a really nice fragrance you're wearing. But I don't think you'll get people coming up to you saying, crikey, what are you wearing, man? That's some sort of stuff there. You know, it really just doesn't have that. This isn't what this is all about. This is quintessentially a gentleman's classic cologne. So it doesn't have that beast level of projection, and, you know, third-party comments are, you know, resulting from that. What's the bottle look like? Well, I'm holding it here. I think it's got a bit of an Art Deco look to it. Now, this bottle will be recognizable to people who like the Dunhill House of Fragrances, because you'll also see this bottle used with Dunhill Edition and Dunhill D as well. So it's been employed throughout the range, as has the cap. The cap's the same. It's a plastic cap which has Alfred Dunhill written on the raised area. You've seen the atomizers, pretty standard fare. And on the front of the bottle, very simple Dunhill for Men. Very classic, very elegant, pretty much very similar to the fragrance. And the box that it comes in, it's a sort of bronze box with those black lines, as you can see. Again, the look of the box will be similar to people who will recognize Dunhill Edition, Dunhill D as well. This same box, this same styling is used across the range, so it doesn't really, you know, stand out particularly. What's the value like? Well, bit of an ace up the sleeve here, as has, of course, many of the Dunhill fragrances. They are a fragrance house which I think punches way above its weight for the amount of money you have to spend to get into them. And this Dunhill for Men, this classic, quintessential fragrance, I bought for £19 from Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description box below if you're interested in purchasing some too. But £19 for a fragrance which is so classic, so elegant, so wearable, with such performance, I think is a blinding bargain. And, you know, since I discovered Dunhill, the house, the deeper I get into more and more fragrances, the more I love them, and I love them in some regard, not just for their performance and their formulation, but because they're so cheap. You know, you can afford to buy them and experiment, because let's be honest, if you buy it blind, you don't like it, pass it on to a friend or relative, and they will love you forever because they'll think it's a fantastic gift. So there we go. Those are the sort of elements of this fragrance, which is essentially an elegant, classy sort of Art Deco fragrance, which I know in its time has been worn by the greats. We know that it was worn by Humphrey Bogart. He patronised Alfred Dunhill's fragrances. We know that it's been worn by, you know, David Niven, these classic chaps of the golden era of men's style. So it's got the heritage, and that heritage is represented in the traditional nature of its fragrance. There is something of a classic, timeless elegance to this. I think men will be wearing this in another 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, because it's got that ability to be worn across the ages, because it is so classic. It's lemon, it's flowery, and it's unashamedly masculine at the same time, even though it has something of a juxtaposition there. But I think it's absolutely glorious, and I can only commend it to you. It is something of a national treasure, and for this price, long may it last. Now at this stage, I normally suggest to you somebody who I can embody as the person who I imagine wearing this fragrance, and I've already mentioned the name, and that's David Niven, a classic gentleman of all gentlemen. You know, somebody who was a outstanding professional soldier during the war, yet still known for his quintessential Britishness and his gentlemanly manner, a juxtaposition, a bit like Alfred Dunhill for men. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this review and appraisal of Dunhill for men. If you have, do us a favour, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel as well. That way you won't miss any of our future material. So until the next time we meet, hopefully looking good, smelling great, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you very soon.